That the border issue that the wall should have never been a political issue. This was a human trafficking issue.
Of course.
I have led or played a key part in over 70 undercover child rescue missions. I realized if we could get these kids out before they were ever hurt the first time, in her case, a quote 0 kilometer mile, right?
Right.
I knew that would be a miracle.
This is Unshaken and Unafraid with Joe Pags.
You know, we grow up and we don't think that really bad people exist. We actually think that really bad people are those that are in jail, or maybe they're in movies, they're away from us. It turns out there's an underbelly that hadn't been exposed as much as it is now that exists. And the guy who helped to expose that is with me right now. It's Paul Hutchinson. He is the executive producer of Sound of Freedom, and he's a philanthropist who came in today to Chris in our new studio. And Paul, first of all, I really appreciate you. Thank you. Let me shake your hand around the microphones. It's good to see you. What I just said is true. I'm 58 years old, 59, just turned 59. And in my upbringing, I didn't think about children being focused on. I didn't think about child predators. I didn't think about the human and sex trafficking that goes on. And it's massive. We had no idea until Sound of Freedom came out. The book, let's show the book first and foremost. Go to soundoffreedombook.com or get it on Amazon. If you haven't seen the movie, make sure you go and see the movie because it's unbelievable. So, was I naive? Do they hide it really well? Why didn't I know more about this until you exposed it as much as you did?
I do believe that it's getting worse. You know, the easy access to pornography that everybody has it literally in the palm of their hand with their phones, and the addictions that lead some people to a place where they need something harder to have that same fix. You know, if they're addicted to these, you know, now don't get me wrong. Not everybody who's listening to us is probably seeing pornography. It doesn't mean you're going to become a predator.
Right.
However, almost every one of the guys that we arrested started with an addiction, and that addiction to that kind of thing leads them down a dark road where some of them they start looking at something a little bit younger, a little bit more grotesque or more brutal or whatnot. And,
right.
and in doing so, pretty soon they're fantasizing about things they wouldn't have even thought was attractive 5 years ago. And then they're acting out on these horrific fantasies. So yes, the problem is growing, and but the problem isn't just in dark alleys. You know, our threats to our children aren't necessarily in third world countries. Our threats to our children are in their backpacks or on their phones, right? It's a community that if we don't monitor it properly can be pretty dangerous for our children.
It's Paul Hutchinson. You have to get the book Sound of Freedom. You have to go see the movie if you haven't seen it yet. I'm in the information business. That's why I'm bothered by it. And I've got 5 daughters. That's why I'm bothered by it. And now we've been affected by people who have done untoward things to my children, and we've done the best we can to fix that. But again, is it naivete, or are they really, really good at hiding it? Because it's there if you want to find it. I'm not somebody who wants to find it, so maybe I'm just, floating around not realizing what's around me. So are they really good at hiding the networks? Are they really good at hiding what they're doing? Because again, being in the information business, you hear about the pedophile got arrested here, the sex offender over there, he's going to get this and that and the other. When people ask me, my answer is the death penalty for sex offenders on children. I believe in that. But at the same time, I thought it was fringe. It seems to be much bigger than I thought.
It is. It's Joe. It's the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world.
That is so sick.
And good people don't even.
And there's a hunger for that for some reason.
It is. And in fact, it's now the second most profitable. It surpassed the illegal arms trade.
Wow.
And it will soon surpass the drug trade, because you could sell a bag of cocaine once. You could sell a minor, a victim like this, a child, 10, 20 times a day for 5, 10 years. And so it's incredibly profitable. Now, here's the thing, though. The biggest threat for most of our listeners is not the 10 plus million children who are being trafficked. Those, if you've seen The Sound of Freedom, yes, things do happen where a child is taken from a healthy home and taken to another country, but that's not the norm. The typical child that is taken like that comes from broken homes, runaways, a broken foster care program. And so the more that we can do to keep the integrity of our family together, the safer our children will be. In fact, I'm just going to throw this out because I know we have a primarily Christian audience with some of the radio show. If I could tell you one thing that you could do to make a massive impact with holding your family together. In fact, the average divorce rate in the United States today is over 50%. So you have about a 1 in 2 chance of getting a divorce in the United States, having a broken family.
Right.
If you could do one thing, and it would cost 2 to 5 minutes a day, taking that divorce rate from 1 in 2 to over 1 in 1,000, would you want to know what it is? Of course, yeah.
Absolutely.
Here's what's crazy. Simply praying together with your spouse every day. It doesn't have to be something big and flowery. No, just hold hands together and say thank you. That one thing every single day takes the divorce rate from 1 in 2 to 1 in 1,152. It's astonishing.
It really
the
is.
difference with just that one thing. And so, parents are like, what can I do? How can I help keep my kids safe? Well, they've all said that praying together, families that pray together stay together. And that's a statistic that proves that indeed that one act can help keep your family safe. Now, beyond that, it's important that parents have a healthy relationship with their children where they can very comfortably come to you and say when something's off. Say, hey, Dad, you know what? I don't like it when we invite Uncle Harry over because he's, he touches me weird when we hug and he says we should have secrets outside of you, or I don't like this babysitter.
And the knee jerk would be, Uncle Harry would never do that.
Well, and see, here's the problem. That's the worst thing that can happen when a child.
But that's probably what happens, though, right?
It probably is.
Initially.
Yes. And sadly, over 90% of children who are abused in this way, it's familial. It's a family member. It's somebody that the parents
What's the percent?
know. Over 90. It's 92% was the last
Wow.
number I heard.
That is so sick.
It is. And so yes, we need to pay attention to our kids when you're traveling. Yes, you need to make sure that you know what homes they're staying in, or if they're traveling on their own, et cetera. But most importantly, you need a healthy relationship where you can be their 911, where they can say, hey, you know what? I don't like this babysitter. She's showing us pornography. She says that we should trust her more than you. We've done rescue missions. Now, just a quick background.
Good.
I have led or played a key part in over 70 undercover child rescue missions in 15 countries.
Thank God.
I know where these kids were coming from. I know how they were brought into these horrific situations, and I know that a lot of them were actually sleeping in their own beds at night, and their parents had no idea that these
While it was going on.
While it was going on. We had one where there's this little girl. She was 12. She just turned 13. Her aunt was babysitting her. Her aunt was showing her pornography. Her aunt said, hey, you should trust me more than your mom. And her aunt started giving her drugs. They were doing some pot together, et cetera. Then she was using this fear-based control with this little girl. And then she said, hey, you know what? You're going to lose your virginity anyway. If you lose it to these rich Americans, you're going to earn $500. She was charging us $5,000. The mother had no idea. This is how these children are brought into these situations. And it happens a lot.
And then it becomes the norm for the 12, 13-year-old.
Absolutely.
This is my life. We're making good money at it.
Yeah.
It's going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
Wow, that's truly sick. Is it a situation like we've seen on television in movies where they say, if you tell your parents, I'll kill them. If you tell somebody other than me, your sister's going to disappear. I mean, is it leveraged that way, or is the leverage always the money, or is it both?
No. Very seldom it's money. It's almost always the fear. In fact, in the last administration, over that 4 years, we had an average of 130,000 children a year that were brought across the southern border. That the border issue the wall should have never been a political issue. This was a human trafficking issue.
Of course.
Those 130,000 children a year, undocumented, unaccompanied minors brought into the country. Now, every single day during those 4 years, every single day, children in Latin America were taken from healthy families. Now, I didn't say wealthy families. These parents didn't have the resources to follow up, but they had a mom and a dad. But immediately, these children were drugged, they were raped, then they were told, listen, we know where your mother lives. We know where your sister goes to school. You don't want something bad to happen to them. So you're going to do exactly what we say. And so what would happen, they would then bring them up to the border. They would have a phone number and an address of their new quote unquote sponsor. These sponsors did not have FBI background checks. They weren't verified. In fact, many of them had no relations whatsoever to these children. And if these children were put into a healthy home, there was a lot of good families that wanted to help these kids as they were coming across. Their entire communities that said, okay, we're all going to kind of have all these foster kids. And like some of these communities, 70, 85% of the children that were brought in, quote, ran away within the first week or two. Why? Because those kids were told, if you don't show up to this location with this new, quote, sponsor, bad things are going to happen. So there, we portrayed this in the Sound of Freedom movie with the little boy coming across the border where the perpetrator said to him, now, you don't want something bad to happen to your sister. You're going to do exactly what we say. And then everything will be okay. And these kids are completely compliant.
It is Paul Hutchinson. It's an amazing task that you've taken on. It really is, because you mentioned the last administration. This is not a political interview that we're doing. But I have no problem saying 300,000 plus kids disappeared. But as you said, they would come over with a wristband, or they would come over with a piece of paper in their pocket saying who the person was, what the phone number was, what the address was. We know, documented, we know dozens and dozens of kids were sent to the same address. And nobody in the administration thought even 2 seconds about it. Had we closed the border then, and again, this isn't about border, this is about differences between then and now, where we know we have zero illegal aliens being let into the interior of the United States today, whereas we had thousands a day before. Had they simply just followed the laws and closed the border, would the cartels, would the sex trafficking people would they have been thwarted? Would it have been over, or would they have figured it out another way?
Well, there were plenty of other ways. In fact, here's the reason why.
When you've got an open border like a sieve, that's got to be easy pickings.
Well, here's what happened. They were bringing the supply to the demand.
Right.
So the United States is the #1 producer and consumer of child pornography in the world.
That is not an award we want.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all. And so the demand was coming from Americans. And for years, for the 10 years that I was doing undercover work, I would be able to go in with my team in any city in the world, especially in Latin America, where foreigners would visit, everywhere from Puerto Vallarta to Cancun to everywhere in between, right? And immediately, within minutes, if you're walking with your wife, then nobody comes up to you. You're walking there by yourself or a couple guys. Immediately, guys would come up to us and say, "Hey, you want some blow? You want some cocaine? You want some girls?" And most of them would have connections with the guys who are selling minors in those areas. And so again, the demand, the Americans going to the supply on these areas in South America. Over that 4-year period of time, they realized, hey, it was a lot more lucrative to bring the supply to the demand.
Yeah.
And so that's what was happening.
It is Paul Hutchinson. Why do you do this? Did something happen where you said, I must save the children? Was there a story that you said, that's got to be happening on a wide scale and I've got to stop it?
Well, it started out a little over 11 years ago. Okay. In fact, this was portrayed in the movie Sound of Freedom. My character was the wealthy fund manager.
Pablo was you.
Pablo, yeah. Okay. Quit his job to go help rescue the kids. You know, partway into the movie, Jim Caviezel's like, if I can convince Pablo, I can make this work, because he needed somebody who could fund it and somebody who could play a role. So in real life, I got a phone call from our attorney general. And he said, Paul, he knew about some of my background, some of the skills that I had. And he also knew that I was donating a lot of money to child-related charities. I was on the Make-A-Wish board of directors in our area at the time. And so he said, Paul, I need to talk to you about something pretty dark. It's child trafficking. He introduced me to some operators who were in Colombia at the time. And they needed some money to help rescue about 20 kids. I helped them. When
we say operators, are they governmental operators or are they independent operators?
Former government, former Homeland Security, former CIA.
These guys are really
FBI's.
good.
Yeah, they knew what they were doing.
Okay.
And so I helped to fund this rescue of about 20 kids in Cartagena. A few weeks later, one of the operators called me and he said, Paul, I'm here in Cartagena. There's not just 20 kids. There's more than 50 here, more than 100. Wow. In the other cities tied to these rings. He said, if we just take down one of them, we'll rescue 15 or 20 kids. He said, I believe we can rescue all 100 kids on the same day. Wow. But I need your help. And I said, well, how much do you need?
Was that Tim Ballard?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I refer to him as the Homeland Security agent. We separated about 6 years ago.
Okay.
I'm not going to go into depth, but
Okay.
you can look online and find out the reasons behind that. I knew, well, I'm not going to go into depth there, but we had very different views, and we were best friends. We were best friends for about 5 years. He was at my house all the time. We had a lot of planning. I did a lot of undercover work, but yeah, beyond that, about the time the movie came out, about a year before that, we had separated. But yeah, him, a guy by the name of Matt, was a former CIA. Dave Lopez, great man. He was former Green Beret, one of them, very, very highly decorated. Glenn Devitt, very good man. These were all operators who were on this mission. So I get a call from the Homeland Security agent. And he said, Paul, I need your help. And I said, well, how much do you need? He said, I need you. Can you be in Colombia in 2 days?
Wow.
I said, well, okay, why do you need me? He said, the head trafficker has a piece of property that he wants to develop into a child resort where he's selling his victims to wealthy Americans, kind of like a Jeffrey Epstein.
And he needed somebody who was literally a wealthy American.
Yeah, he said that we need this trafficker wants to develop it. He needs about $8 million to build it out. He believes he can make tens of millions of dollars a year in this operation. Wow. He said, I can't teach my Navy SEALs how to negotiate a multi-million-dollar deal like this. He said, and I don't know of any wealthy, real estate developer guys who have the training that you have. And so 2 days later, I'm face to face with the most evil people you can imagine.
And you've got to make them think that you're like them.
Yeah, I had
you're
to.
Down. You're in for
absolutely. In fact, my business partner called me like 2 hours after I accepted the invitation to go down, and we were doing well. I mean, we're talking billions under management in our company, and he said, Paul, I heard what you're thinking of doing. He said, you're going to Colombia posing as a wealthy buyer. He said, have you thought this through? He said, your answer was probably no, or else I wouldn't be doing it. Yeah, exactly. He said, you're set. You can sell out today, buy an island, be happy the rest of your life. I said, John, would I really be happy if I bought an island, if I bought a plane, if I bought another plane, bought another helicopter? I said, tell me this. If I was doing something else dangerous tomorrow, if I was climbing Everest tomorrow, you and I would have the same conversation. He goes, yeah, we probably would. That'd be kind of stupid too with where you're at right now. I said, and when I'm 95 years old and I look back at my life and I say, I climbed this mountain and I built this multi-billion-dollar company and I helped rescue this many children, which one of them matters at all?
Exactly.
And so yes, I'm there negotiating with these guys, and halfway through, one of the traffickers, he said, Pablo, I have a gift for you.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I said, what's your gift? And he hands me his phone. There's a picture of a 11-year-old girl. He called her Princess. He said, this is a 0 kilometer mile 11-year-old.
So brand new.
Yeah, brand new. And you can imagine what that means.
And Paul, you have to look at that and you have to act like you're interested.
Well, and the Navy SEAL,
what I mean? That's sick.
The Navy SEAL that was right behind me, he clears his throat. He says, I need to clear the restaurant, make sure we're safe. Later, when we were debriefing, he said, you know what? I almost unholstered my weapon and shot him right there. He says, that little girl looked like my daughter at home. He said, but I know if I did that, we would have lost all the other kids. Now, in the movie, my character told Jim Caviezel, oh, I don't want to go because we don't have the government that's backing this thing. And it wasn't until he gave a picture of this 11-year-old girl to my driver where seeing that picture changed my take.
That was the picture you actually saw at the negotiation.
Yeah, but in real life, I was already there.
When you're sitting there with these, the lowest of the low, the dredges of society, the people that would do horrible things to our kids if they could, how do you not have your heart pounding out of your chest? How do you not want to strangle them right then and there? Absolutely. Which would have ended up in your death. Obviously, you can't do that. But how did you know going in that you would have the intestinal fortitude to keep it together because you know that you're surrounded by evil?
Absolutely. And what's interesting is when he said that, I'll tell you how I handled it here. He showed me this picture. This is the very first time that I saw what I knew was a child being sold. Her innocence was being offered to me.
So you knew of it. You knew that it was happening. You were financing getting them out, but you never saw one.
I never saw one until I saw that picture. And seeing that
What
picture,
does that do to you viscerally? What does
first
it
of
do?
all, it galvanized my commitment. I realized if we could get these kids out before they were ever hurt the first time, in her case, a quote 0 kilometer mile, right?
Right.
I knew that would be a miracle if we could get him out as a virgin. And I said, Fuego, I said, he said something like, we just took delivery of some or whatever. I said, Fuego, I said, you're going to bring, you said you have some others like her? He says, oh, I have 3 or 4 more. I said, you're going to bring those to the party, right? Because our deal was this. I told him, listen.
That's where you were going to save them.
I'll fund your project under one condition. We're going to have a party. I'm going to bring a bunch of my rich friends. We're going to bring all these kids. If I'm impressed with the inventory that you have, then I'll fund your project. So I told him right then, I said, now you're bringing those to my party too, right?
That was so smart, man.
He goes, oh no. He says, those ones are too expensive. I said, too expensive? I'm already paying this guy $25,000. I'm paying him $500 per child just for a minimum of 50 kids, just for 2 hours in the afternoon.
Right.
He said, Jefe, which is boss, he said, you already paid $25,000. You want to F these other virgins. He says, it's going to cost you maybe $2,000, maybe $5,000 for that little one. Going to cost you $10,000 more. Now, at this point, no acting involved. I was legitimately pissed.
Yeah.
I was so mad. He was talking about these kids like they're commodities.
Right.
I'm in my nice suit. I have $2,000 cufflinks on, right? I'm there posing as this wealthy playboy that's financing this thing. And I put my hands on my chest and I'm like, you don't think I can afford an extra $10,000? He's like, oh no, Jefe, no. I said, I want every one.
So smart.
Of those new ones at the party. I said they damn well better be virgins when they get there. They're not for you. They're for me and my guys. You touch them between now and then, this entire deal's off. Do you understand?
Masterful, man. You made them leave them alone, and you got them all there.
But the hardest part for me...
Did he bring them all?
He did. And that's what was the hardest part for me. Now, seeing the picture, talking about this disgusting world was hard enough. But
pretending you're part of it.
But what changed my life was the day of the sting operation.
Right.
These guys had brought...
They had no idea, did they? They had no freaking clue.
No idea. They brought 54 kids. And I remember the kids were in the kind of a outdoor house type of a thing, a grass roof, palapa as they call it. And we were negotiating a table outside. And we had undercover cameras because we have to get them on camera to say exactly why the kids were. So they couldn't say later, oh, I thought it was at a pool party or whatever, right? So we're having this conversation and we order tequila. Tequila is the sign to the waiters to call in the sting, and boom, they were supposed to hit within 4 or 5 minutes. Well, there was a delay. It was like 45 minutes later before they came. Well, what happened is, so the traffickers thought, okay, it's time for the party to start. And one of them brings out the cocaine. One of them goes in the house where were keeping the children. And we're sitting there waiting. No agents are hitting the island. Nobody. And all of a sudden
Did they not see the signal?
Well, no, what happened is there was somebody that was part of the government that was the Child Protective Services side. She slept through her alarm that morning. In the movie, we have the delay, meaning that one of the boats didn't come in time. In reality, all 54 kids were there. But the delay was because she said, you guys can't do this thing until I'm there, and she had to get on a slow boat anyway. We had no idea what was going on. All we knew is that the agents hadn't come in. And so all of a sudden he's in there. A couple of traffickers go in with the kids.
Are the agents not intertwined with you the entire time?
No, we have guys that are with me that are my.
But you're waiting for everybody else to come up.
Yeah, those guys are supposed to come in with guns and arrest all of us. The bad guys were supposed to think that we were there, that we got arrested too, right? So these traffickers.
And they actually depicted you getting arrested in the movie.
Yeah,
right.
That's what happens in real life as well. So these traffickers are in there with the kids, and we could hear a couple of the kids crying. And I'm thinking, where are the agents? Why is it? And then a few minutes later, he comes back out, and he has 4 virgins.
And he's like, good news,
Joe. These kids are scared.
Oh, of course.
I'm sitting on a chair. I'm just like you and I. So imagine this scene. I'm in real life. I'm here sitting on a chair around this table. They bring out these kids, 3 little girls, 1 little boy. This little boy was 11. They got him from Haiti. They had given him cocaine that morning because he was so scared. What kind of monster thinks that that's attractive?
No.
Right?
Disgusting.
And this little girl, the same one that he showed me in the picture, She's standing up in front of me. Her standing up, she's not much taller than I am sitting down. So you can imagine this little girl, almost eye level. And her makeup had been smeared because she had been crying. She was so scared of meeting us, the men who were supposed to defile her. Mm. And everything in me wanted to just say, you're going to be fine. You're going to see your parents.
You couldn't yet.
I couldn't say that yet. We're waiting for the agents.
So they're not presenting you the product, and the agents aren't there yet.
They aren't even there.
It's got to feel like an eternity.
It was heartbreaking to look into her eyes. And at that moment, I took her little hands. I just said 2 words. I said, está bien. It's okay. And I looked in her eyes and I made a solemn promise at that moment to myself, to God, to that child, that I was going to dedicate my life to eradicating that evil. I couldn't imagine anything worse.
Yeah.
Than an 11-year-old child in that position. And so I told that traffickers, I said, bro, you know what? These are, wow, this is exactly what you said, but.
Because it had taken so long and because you weren't taking these children to the huts or whatever these disgusting people do, did they start to say, what's up?
Well, what happened? They bring him out. We're supposed to.
Why aren't you doing what you came here to do?
So here's what I said to him. No, I'm no special negotiator. I haven't done this.
You must be pretty good at it, though.
But what I did say is this. I said, listen, you guys have proven to me that you could do what you said you would do. You've provided the kids. I told you that if I see the inventory, that I'm willing to fund your project. I said, we start doing this cocaine, we start, doing the stuff with the kids. I'm gonna have a great time, but I'm gonna be effed up for the next couple of days. I said, why don't we do this? Take the kids back in, bring out a notebook and a pen. Let's do this business plan. I had negotiated hundreds of business plans in my career.
Right.
I had never negotiated something like this.
You're making a business plan for the child sex traffickers.
This was the darkest plan. And a lot of the things that we depicted in the movie came from what we learned in drawing out this business plan and literally delaying until the agents finally came. And I go through this in the Sound of Freedom book. I go through all of the details of what happened.
Let's show that again if you don't mind. Let's show it to the camera. Sound of Freedom book. Go and get this right now. It's available. Go to Amazon. You can go to soundoffreedombook.com. If you haven't seen the movie yet, go see the movie. Now, does the book depict it exactly as it happened and the movie is a little bit dramatized?
Yeah. The movie, we took 8 different missions and put them all together into one storyline.
Right.
The book.
You only have a couple of hours. Yeah, you have
it
to do
is.
what you have to do.
And more important than that, the book, the more than half of the book isn't the rescue missions. More than half of the book is tools that parents can use to keep their kids safe, right?
Perfect.
That we've learned from the missions, identifying situational awareness and understanding how to read a room and what healing really looks like, how to curb the demand side, how to help people heal from their trauma so they don't ever pass it on. In any way to children. This is the majority of the book is all about healing humanity and about keeping our kids safe and things that we learn. So, back to the missioning part of
you make the business plan for these scumbags.
I'm drawing this thing out, and it's too dark for radio. I'm not even gonna even in the book. There's a couple places in the book I say, okay, you might want to skip forward to the next page here.
Okay.
This part's dark, but some people need to hear how dark the world is so that we can see the light, so that we can together say, I'm done with this. I'm sorry, but this is not acceptable everywhere, anywhere. And so then finally the after 45-minute delay, finally the agents came, stormed the island, arrest everybody, us included. I'm laying there on the ground in the sand with ants crawling over the top, and it was
handcuffed behind your back, the whole deal.
Yeah, this was so much better than being in that conversation with these guys.
Wow.
And the Child Protective Services people came in with the children, and they were trying to calm the kids down, and they did so.
They didn't know what the hell's going on at this point.
Yeah, and the kids were scared. They guys come in, run with guns, and they had just been presented to us and all this stuff,
right.
And so they started singing and laughing with the children, and that sound of freedom was the most beautiful sound that I ever heard. I started crying, and I turned to the operator that was with me. I said, bro, I spent my whole life making money, making rich people richer. I want to make a difference. I want to help. How can I help? And he said, Paul, he said, there's a lot of the demand for stuff like this that comes from people like you. I said, what do you mean people like me? He said, well, don't take this wrong, but guys who have a degree of arrogance and greed and lust. And, the me 10 years ago was very different than what I've transformed to in every way I can. I was Paul effing Hutchinson. I had a basketball court in my basement and 10 private suites and stripper poles on a DJ booth in my party room. I mean, it was that.
You were that guy.
I was that guy. But seeing that firsthand, I wasn't doing anything illegal. I was helping kids, but I was living in that same frequency, that same energy as some of these guys. And if I could use, I already had pictures of me online with Ferraris and Lambos and jets and yachts and all this stuff. And so they created a fake profile using all of these pictures, not as Paul Hutchinson, but Paul Stone, Paul Steele, Paul Black. And for the next 10 years, continued to do these missions. I quit my job and decided to focus full time on philanthropy and fighting this greatest evil.
Thank God you did. I mean, you saved a lot of people in the last 10 years. Did that little girl look at you? Did she know what was going down? Did she realize that you just saved her life?
Here's what happened. They weren't supposed to tell the kids that we were the good guys.
Why?
Because we don't know if they were somehow still tied with traffickers, other family members, or and
you didn't break the control immediately, so you're right. The bad guys still knew who they were, where they were from, and all that.
Yeah,
so they still feared for their families being affected.
However, either that little girl felt something when she was standing there in front of us, or maybe somebody told her, because as we were being led off the island, the traffickers were already gone in separate boats, and as we, the operators, were being led off the island, that little girl was standing. There was a little screen on the door of the house they were in, and her hand was on that screen of the door. She was crying again, but she was smiling and waving with her other hand. She had her little friends by her, and she said in her broken English, she said, "Thank you, Americans." And I started crying. I thought, building a big company or buying a new toy or whatever else, those are so unfulfilling in comparison to the joy in helping another human being break free from something so dark. And so, that was transformative.
I'm so glad she knew. I'm so glad she knew. It sounds to me, Paul, like when you looked her in the eye, she already knew there was goodness there. But the fear, you have to have the fear that now she's going to go and tell the bad guys, this guy is, he's not here for good. He's not here to help you. Because at that point, they have to feel like they're property, which is disgusting, but they're the property of the bad guys. If I do anything bad, my mom will die. Yeah. My brother will die. But something you conveyed to her just by looking at her, I mean, I think you started setting her free that moment. I mean, it's got to be what you're feeling as well. I mean, I don't have the feeling that you have right now in feeling the emotions come back because I didn't do it. But knowing that you did fills me and those who are watching and listening. So you made the right choice. Ferraris are cool, though. I mean, I don't think I've ever sat in one. Stripper poles, that's something else for a different day. But I get it. You work as hard as you can to achieve something. And then at some point you say to yourself, this isn't what I was trying to achieve. I was trying to achieve something better. And you just did that. So you would give up all the riches to have that moment that day, releasing those people,
Absolutely.
Those children.
Yeah. In fact, I gave up all of that. I still have plenty of money, but that lifestyle was interesting.
But you could have kept on printing it though.
Years later, I had released a lot of people and circumstances that were part of that previous life, including, my second wife that, our relationship was super toxic. She was involved with a lot of those parties and stuff. And I ended up in Haiti. I had done 12 undercover missions in Haiti. And sadly, I was at a funeral for one of my my operators, Jim, and I met the last time in Haiti, a lot of corruption there, and I met lying at the airport, and I turn around, there's this beautiful woman. Now I tell people meeting a beautiful Colombian actress is kind of cool, but when she's donating her time at an orphanage in Haiti, that's amazing. Yeah. So her name is Ada Vanessa, H-A-D-A, Vanessa. She's now my wife. And I remember a few months after we met, I had been nominated to then receive the Ellis Island Medal of Honor. And it was supposed to be this gala where I needed a tuxedo. And I called her up and I said, hey, we're going to this gala. I said, I need to match which tuxedo I want to wear. What color is your gala dress? And she said, well, I don't have a gala dress. I said, oh, well, that's a problem. Let's go get one. So I picked her up. We went to the store and found her a beautiful dress. It was about a $2,000 dress. And we're on our way to the checkout and she stops because she looked at the tag and she said, Paul, what's the average cost of rescuing a trafficked child?
Wow.
I said, we average about $2,000 a child is what our average is. She said, I'm not wearing a child. She said, we can buy a $200 dress and donate the rest to the foundation. And that kind of marks everything for the last 7 years with her. She's now the executive director of the Child Liberation Foundation and works tirelessly in not only helping with the safe houses with the kids, but more importantly in preventative measures with certification programs for doctors and anybody in healthcare or in hospitality in hotels, et cetera, to know what to look for. And we've taken down huge trafficking rings because of those people in those professions knowing now what to look for with the kids.
Now that people know who you are, can you still do it?
Oh, no, not at all. In fact,
like you can go to another meeting. I mean, that would.
I couldn't do that. In fact, that mission 11 years ago, the Homeland Security agent, he wanted to go public back then. He went on CNN, ABC, and so technically, once you go public, you can't really do.
You're burned. You're done.
Yeah, you can't do the deep cover. So my last one was a little over about 2.5 years ago.
Okay.
Before the movie.
That you were actually involved in.
That I was involved. Yeah, I led or played a key part in over 70, but that one was in Ecuador. And that was the last time because after that, my wife, my daughter, and my kids, and they said, Paul, you need to go public. And at the time, the movie was worth nothing. We had finished the film. 5 years after we finished, we were still blacklisted. Hollywood, everybody, we couldn't get distribution anywhere.
Yeah, I was going to get there, but tell the story.
So there, we can touch on that in a second. So my wife, kids are like, well, you know what? We've got to get this message out to the public. And so I did my first podcast and got shared tens of thousands of times within a few days. And a few months later, and I don't know, the divine connections here, but Angel Studios picked up the contract on the film. We realized that if we couldn't go the Hollywood route of traditional distribution, we needed to take the movie to the people by the people.
Right.
And there was a huge conservative base of people who had been fans of things like The Chosen on the Angel Studios.
50% of the country wasn't being served by entertainment.
Exactly.
Was not being served by the movie industry. So there was a hunger there, but we were deep in the midst of woke, and we were deep in the midst of the pandemic and everything else. So how did you know you can get it out? Angel Studios said, yeah, let's do it. But at the same time, everybody was blacklisting them as well.
Absolutely.
So how did you know it was going to get out? It's a huge success. I thank God that it did.
We had no idea that it was. I really believe that it was divine providence.
Yeah.
I believe that it was the right time that humanity needed to see. I knew that we couldn't take millions of people to see what we had seen. That would be dangerous.
Right.
But we could help millions of people feel what we had felt. So I'm the primary investor in the Sound of Freedom. We had some other big families and stuff that came on later, but I'm primary investor and executive producer. And the only reason why I put $1 into it, because investing in movies is not a very wise investment. I know I'm an investor, right? I know what things are risky and what.
Had you ever done movies before this?
Never. You know why? Because the best way to make $10 million to have $10 million after a movie's done is to start with $100 million, right? It's the fastest way to lose.
It's pretty good.
Lot. So I mean, it was an anomaly that we only spent $14 million on the film, and we've done almost $300 million now in total distribution.
That's amazing.
But more than the money, the money is nothing. 100% of my profits all go right back into safe houses and healing retreats, et cetera. But most importantly, over 70 million people have seen Sound of Freedom, and hundreds of millions of children are safer now because of the awareness.
It's Paul Hutchinson. Go get the book at soundoffreedombook.com. Go to Amazon, get it there. See the movie if you haven't seen it. It's been several years since I've seen it, so I need to go and watch it again. Didn't want to before interviewing you. As I told you before, I want to be spontaneous with these questions that I have that pop up. When you're the executive producer of a movie like this, that is your story. How much
That's everybody's story.
No, I understand that, but you were literally involved in the negotiations. You were face to face with death. They would have killed you had they had any indication that you were not who you said you were. When the movie comes together, because there are parts of it that are different in the movie, because like you said, 2 hours, you can't do months and months and months or years of research. But do you have the final say? And yes, that's going to be accurate enough. Do you not have the final say? As the primary financier, what say do you have? All say or nothing?
Well, it's an important point. So when we very first had the movie, so myself and the Homeland Security agent, a couple others, we were like, okay, this story needs to get out. What do we need to do with it? We went into Sony, Lionsgate, Paramount. They were actually very interested in the story. They were willing to pay some money for some of the life rights to make that happen.
Right.
But they wanted full literary control. They could have changed it whatever way they wanted to. They could have had my character and Jim Caviezel in a gay sex scene in the middle of the movie. We couldn't do anything about it, right? Because they would have that full control. And so
I think that would have hurt the movie. Just going to put it out there.
Probably would have.
I don't think that would have benefited.
I don't think Jim Caviezel would have played that.
I don't think so either. No. So obviously you're not going to go that route.
Yeah. So that's when we decided, okay, the only way we can really maintain control is if we don't get outside funding, if we do it all ourselves. And so that's when I said, okay, I will put all of the money of all the pre-production. And it was roughly $600,000 just for, creating the script and a bunch of other things in the beginning. So we went all over trying to find the right team, and it was at a Grammys after party. It was something called Rock Against Child Trafficking. I had been invited to, and Pierce Brosnan was there. Vicente Fox, the former president of Mexico, was there, and there was a guy there by the name of Eduardo Verástegui. And Eduardo he was an actor in Colombia. He now plays me in the movie. He's a producer of Sound of Freedom, but Eduardo had just finished a movie called Little Boy, which was it was such a beautiful depiction of faith. It was powerful. He did such a beautiful job on it that when I saw that film, he invited me to a preview of it. It hadn't been out yet, and I then told him the story of the mission, and he says, "Hermano, we need to make a movie of this." I said, "Yeah, we do." And I was so impressed with how well they handled that film that Tim and I decided, you know what? Yeah, we're going to have these guys put it together. And so I'll put all of the money in, and we brought them up to my family cabin for a few weeks. They had this huge wall full of sticky notes of all these different stories. We told them a bunch of the stories of a bunch of different missions, and I shared a bunch with them, and some of the operators did as well. And then they formulated the script. And at the time, the frustration I had, honestly, was there was undue credit on Jim Caviezel's character. There was a lot of operations that were done by guys like Dave Lopez and Glenn and a bunch of others but we couldn't. And I said, listen, the real focus needs to be on the kids because people are fallible.
Yeah.
And between you and me, I kind of knew some of the background of what was going on there because I was in that background. This is why we were super close back then. And I'm like, if some of this stuff comes public, then somebody could fall from grace, and we don't want that, right? So let's put the focus on the kids because that's really what it's about. And that's okay. We took about 20 operators, 8 different missions, weaved them all together into just a handful of actors, and created a success in that it was the awareness that the the public really needed about
Right.
what was going on.
Well, it's like I started the interview. I said, I've been in information now for 36 years. I knew there was a problem with pedophiles and bad people who targeted children. I didn't know it was this. And now that did open my eyes as somebody in the business. It must really be opening everybody else's eyes because they weren't getting it from me because I didn't know all this. With that in mind, how many children in this country now, maybe there's not a number, is it a massive number that have been brought across the border the past 4 years, 10 years, whatever it happens to be, who are still in the sex trade in this country? Are we doing enough with a new FBI, with a new DOJ, with a new CIA? Are we doing enough to find them, identify them, and save them?
I don't think we're doing enough. Absolutely not. And sadly, we've seen it front and center the last
Is it massive right now in this country?
Of course it is. Yeah, it's really massive. And here's the sad thing. And this is so important for parents to understand. The children that are taken, that are sold, that are moved around, taken into a container and moved to another country, those are from broken systems of kids that are vulnerable, that parents aren't going to be looking for them.
Right.
Now, these kids that came in across the border are in that group where if they're a runaway, it's kind of like a foster care program, or there's a huge percentage of kids who disappear from the foster care program that nobody looks for them anymore. But beyond that is the domestic abuse that's happening within the homes of some of these kids that are brought into these situations. They may not be put out on the street as by a pimp. They might not be, online being sold to total strangers, right, but they're absolutely being abused in homes that are not safe for children.
And it was 320,000, the last number we saw,
yes,
just of those who came across the border. I would imagine that American children are being targeted too.
Absolutely.
How does that work? How do we stop that?
Oh, it's a child.
Is it the same thing? Identify the child, yes, and just take it?
Absolutely. Well, so again, the important thing is for us to realize that a huge percentage of children who are being sold sleep in their own beds at night without their parents knowing.
So it's going on currently in the lives of many,
right now,
and parents are clueless.
Exactly. And here's the thing, though. We talk about solutions. Let me tell you what I really believe the solution is. So after 10 years of doing this work, every single time we pulled the kids out of hell, the thing that I wish the most is that we had the ability to go back in time and help these kids before they were ever put in that situation, because now they're super broken.
That's got to weigh so heavily.
Yeah, so heavy. And so I said, okay, and every time we were pulling these kids out, if not enough was being done to fix the demand, another 10, 20 kids were being sucked back into the deepest recesses of hell to fill that demand. So I realized, okay, if I did have a time machine and I went back, I wouldn't just pull the kids out. What I would do is I'd go back before that trafficker crossed that lane, or before the perpetrator. I would sit down with them and say, what is going on in your life that makes you think that in any way it's okay to cross that line? Now, this next part is super important to understand. I have no tolerance for somebody who hurts a child. I mean, they're wasting my oxygen. However, if we're going to fix this problem, we need to ask ourselves where it's coming from, okay? And I recognized that almost every one of the traffickers had been trafficked themselves as children. Almost all the perpetrators had dealt with some severe abuse as children. In fact, 70% of incarcerated felons today admit that they've had abuse as a child, usually sexual abuse as children. And I would say it's closer to 100% because most people never talk about it, right? They never talk about that abuse. And so now, God bless them. The majority of people who go through that pain grow up to be protectors. Most of my undercover operators went through that pain as children and then grew up to be protectors. And but most people, it comes out in low self-esteem or anger or anxiety, depression, PTSD, etc. For some, if not given the help, the love that they need, it will come out in physical, verbal, and sometimes sexual abuse of a child. Now, The important thing is talking about it, holding it inside. It's kind of like a deep wound with an infection. You just hide it. It's not tell mom about this deep wound that I have. Well, I don't tell anybody. That thing gets infected, and later in life it comes out and you lose your arm, right? So that's what's happening with a lot of this trauma. Men are like, oh, I don't want to talk about that thing that happened to me when I was 8. It'll make me less of a man No, it won't. It won't make you less of a man if you talk about it. That was a horrible thing that happened when you were 8 years old by somebody who was holding on to a lot of pain. So really, the answer to liberating the children isn't just pulling kids out of hell. It's pulling the hell out of the adults. Yeah. It's figuring out how we liberate humanity. How do we heal humanity from the toxicity of our own childhood, of our own past, so that we never, ever pass that on.
Have you had one-on-one conversations with these guys? The people who are doing the stealing of kids, the trafficking, and they've all said this to you?
We've talked about where
are they remorseful at all?
No. They, especially the ones who are trafficking the kids, they're in this loop of this is just how things are. What's crazy, there's a lot of female traffickers in Haiti, Dominican
What is that all
Republic.
about? Are they all trafficked themselves as kids?
Most of them.
I mean, because I can't imagine a woman saying, I got a new job, it pays pretty well, I'm going to traffic some kids. I don't see how that happens.
Well, they've all... Here's what we have to understand. Whether it's traffickers, whether it's perpetrators, whether it's somebody down in our own neighborhood, hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
Now, the fact that somebody's hurt doesn't give them an excuse to hurt others, because most people that are hurt figure out how to heal through it. But if we're going to fix this problem, we need to fix the hurt people.
How do we identify, well, we can identify them before they do it, I don't think. But how do we identify people who have been hurt and make them make a better choice? Can we?
Well, we need to recognize that pretty much everybody has been hurt in some way, and everybody's holding on to pain. Let me walk you through this scenario.
Go ahead.
So there's something I call tension transfer. Let's just say you or I, we're good. We've never hurt a child, right?
Never.
We go to work. Let's say that we are dealing with some emotional things from a business partner or some financial things, whatever.
Yes.
We're out of integrity. We haven't fixed our shit. We go to work and we let's say that I go and I yell at this employee, and this employee goes home and he yells at his wife, and that wife, she yells at the son when he comes home from school. That son kicks the dog. The kicking of that dog is tension transfer that started with me.
Yeah.
Right? That's where it started. That was that transfer of that tension. Now let's pretend. Now let's pretend like that guy at work, what I didn't realize, let's say that he was abused as a child. And let's say that 1,000 bad things happened to him and he made 1,000 bad decisions. Let's say those bad decisions included him getting addicted to pornography. And let's say that addiction led to something harder and harder. Pretty soon he's looking at illegal things in his pornography addiction. Right. And on top of that, he's trying to cover up his broken emotions with a lot of alcohol. And because of the alcohol addiction, because his wife doesn't know about the pornography, right? Let's say that because of the alcohol addiction, his wife just left him. And let's say that this is the weekend that he gets his 12-year-old daughter and she's having her little cousin stay over. Now, me acting in a negative place at work and me yelling at that employee, now the tension transfer doesn't just end up with the kicking of a dog. It ends up in this man harming a child.
Yeah.
So, I love the story of a man he's sitting on a couch and he's sitting there and this little boy walks in. He says, Daddy, I want to play baseball with you. And he's like, oh, I'm busy right now. I'm reading the newspaper. Okay. Well, little boy comes back later. Daddy, it's a beautiful day outside. Can we play baseball? And the man turns the page on the newspaper and he sees this map of the world. And so he tears out the map, tears it up in little pieces of paper, and he throws it on the floor. He says, son, you need to learn your geography. Why don't you go get some tape and tape together every single country, every single state, exactly where it's supposed to be. Okay. You do all of that perfectly, and I'll go play baseball with you. Well, he thinks it's going to take a couple hours. Like 5 minutes later, the little boy comes back, and it's perfectly taped together. The dad's like, well, what did you do? How'd you figure that out? And the little boy turns it over. He said, well, there was a picture of a man on the other side.
Wow.
I just put the man together, and the whole world came together. And that's the answer right there. is that we can sit here and say, okay, this law needs to change, those needs to go to prison, whatever else. The reality is looking in the mirror, saying, okay, what needs to change there? And here's the thing, full disclosure, 10 years ago, I'm not Paul Hutchinson. I am Paul effing Hutchinson, right? And I recognized that these traffickers, the common thread wasn't earrings in their noses and tattoos on their necks. The common thread with the traffickers and the perpetrators was arrogance and greed and lust and addictions and unsolved childhood trauma, things like this. That was where it was coming from. And I said to myself, okay, I'm not doing anything illegal. I would never, ever hurt a child.
Right.
However, how is arrogance, greed, lust, addictions, and unhealed trauma, how is that showing up in my life? And what do I need to do to change that about myself?
Yeah.
Because if I had continued down that road, then there's hundreds of millions of people who now are more aware of what's going on, who have heard me and my team and our guys on podcasts, who even the children, because that transition made it so that I put full-time effort into this. That wouldn't have happened if I hadn't started with the man in the mirror. And that's what needs to happen. If we do that, then we save millions of children.
Sam, I'm using that newspaper analogy. Make sure you write that down. That was awesome. No, the whole time, here's the interesting part. Had a great dad. He was loud. He didn't treat me the way that I wanted to be treated all the time. I think I'm a success because of that. It drove me a different way. A lot of people that you just described don't go that way. They don't do what you did. They don't do what I did. And I don't know your backstory, but if my dad were nicer to me, I might not have worked as hard as I worked. It didn't make me go rob banks. It didn't make me end up being a child abuser, anything like that. But I get that some people will react a different way. But I love putting the man together. The whole time you're telling that story, I was thinking of my dad playing ball with me. We said, have a catch. From New York, you say, have a catch. Everybody else says, well, let's play catch. But I wanted to have a catch with him. And if he would have done that, I would have done it so fast because I really, really wanted to have that catch. And I think that was the moral of the story as well. But on the other side, putting the man back together, boy, what a deep think. God, I'm going to make me think about it for a long time. Because again, what I do for a living is so jaded, is so, as my wife would say, I'm in the tornado all the time. I don't think that I'm Joe effing Pags, but maybe some days I feel that way. And that's a level of, let's bring it back down to earth and see how are you going to help people. I give a story. You didn't ask me about this, but I give a story all the time about when somebody questions my constant talk about pro-life. Well, I'm not pro-life. Why do you talk about abortion so much? You're going to change anybody's mind. That's bogus. Of course I'm going to. The people who are firmly pro-abort are going to be that way. People who are firmly pro-life are going to be that way. Those people in the middle say, I'd never be involved in an abortion, but I think they have the right to choose. That person is teetering. They're not really sure what to do. And I've had people over the years that I've been doing what I do actually get a hold of me and say, damn it, you're right, I am pro-life. If I wouldn't be involved in one, and if I wouldn't finance one, and then I say, but do whatever you want, I'm just giving in to what they want me to say, but I'm pro-life, damn it, you did that. That's the win that you get every once in a while. That's the enlightenment that you get. It doesn't matter that I'm on the radio or on television or do a podcast. It matters that one person heard a message that changed his life, and he said, I'm not going to be okay with killing the unborn anymore. And I think that's kind of where you were going with that. I mean, there is a lesson. There's an inflection point in all of us. We have to find it. That's hard to find. How do you find the inflection point? When you look into the eyes of the child, you know that you changed her life for the better. When you look into the eye of the child trafficker, how do you find that in them? How do you know there's even that speck there?
I think that...
Did any of that make sense, what I just said?
Well, absolutely. In fact, a side note, and then I'll go into that, is, Eduardo Verástegui and Alejandro Monteverde, the guys that put together the Sound of Freedom, that are Mexican team Mexico is what we called them.
Okay.
They before the movie that I told you about, Little Boy on Faith, they had one called Bella. Bella was helping. It was a pro-life film.
Yeah.
And what's beautiful is they had over 6,000 letters came in from mothers who, after watching that film, decided to keep their baby. So in reality,
Amazing.
they saved
Wow.
6,000 lives. Now, here's what's important about you and your position here. Back at the time of Abraham Lincoln, it wasn't guys like me and our team. It wasn't the guys rescuing the slaves that created the biggest difference. It was actually people like you. It was the influencers. It was Harriet Beecher Stowe. She wrote a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin, right? She was the Joe Pags of the age. She was the podcaster of the age
right.
with her book. In fact, and millions of Americans were able to see really what was going on in the South. In fact, years later, when Abraham Lincoln met Harriet, he shook her hand. He said, "So you're the little lady that wrote the book that started the big war," right? So in reality, creating impactful change in things like abortion, in things like child abuse or trafficking, it's influencers who have built a platform that have built a level of trust with their audiences like yourself that then can bring these subjects to them and help them live a life where kids are going to be safer, where children are going to be born that might have been aborted, right? So I do believe that you have literally saved the lives of thousands, if not more, children just by you having that voice.
I pray you're right. And I go to bed at night feeling good with my 5 daughters and my 2 grandkids that we're doing something to make a difference. The big push, and I want to finish it on two topics. We'll finish with this, and then I want to hear about the medications that might be able to help people that have been through this. I want to put that out there. But let me finish on what we were just talking about this way. There is a massive tidal wave of mis and disinformation that want to shut you up. And they want to shut me up. They don't want me to think I can change somebody from being, I'm not really sure about abortion, to pro-life. Even though they've always been pro-life, they just needed somebody to affirm that they were pro-life. People want you to shut up because the Jeffrey Epsteins of the world existed and probably still exist. Yeah. They want you to shut up because it's not really as bad as you say, Paul. Why don't you be quiet about it? It's not a big deal. How do you fight that? Now, you're in a position where you used to be Paul effing Hutchinson, and I get it, and I've got a platform, so I get it. Those watching and listening to us, how do they fight that tidal wave? Because that's on their head every day. You better shut up about it. You better not raise your hand. You better not raise a red flag. If you do, you're going to be canceled or put out of society or kicked out of the town square. What do you say to them who don't have what you have and don't have what I kind of have?
The bottom line is there's infinitely more good people in this world than there are
100%.
bad ones. I really believe in the genuine nature of most of humanity. And there's just a small percentage. And sometimes that small percentage comes from their growth to fame, whether it's that arrogance and greed and lust that kind of comes in that position,
right,
or whether they kind of did a deal with the devil, so to speak, and said, you know what, I'll go this direction if I can have all this unlimited money and fame. Whatever it is, it's a small percentage. And when the good people all come together, we're so much stronger. And whether it's, I believe light's going to win. Light doesn't have to fight the darkness. Light existing dissipates the darkness where it doesn't even show up anymore. It's gone. There's no battle. You bring in a flashlight into a room, there's not a battle. No, the light is light. The light is so much more powerful, and I believe that the light of truth, the light of healing, the light of God will completely overcome all this darkness. I think we're going to go through a time of a crumbling of some institutions so that, we can start over. Yeah. I think that difficult things might happen where humanity might have to come to their knees so that they can look inward and they can look heavenward. But I believe that we're close within our lifetime.
We're closer than we've been.
Yes. Yeah. But here's the thing, most religions believe that we're going to have a time of turmoil and then 1,000 years of peace when God comes back. Well, they kind of got that right. But God's not going to come and just wave his hand and we're all going to be nice to each other, right? There's actions that we need to do every day.
You're going to make us work for it.
Yeah, we do. We have to come together. We can't just say, okay, we're just going to sit back and wait, God's going to burn y'all. No, how about we all step forward and let the light shine?
Paul, I can't thank you enough. For those who are watching, he didn't ask me to say this, but Paul said, when do you want me there? And I'll be there. And he came, and here he is. Again, you christened our new studio, I think in the best possible way. Thank you very much for that. And I want to stay in contact. I want to do good things with you, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you so much
Incredibly
for
grateful.
making the time. The microphone's in the way a little bit, but thank you so much for your
Thank you,
friendship
Joe.
and for coming. I'm going to end this here. We can go for another 7 hours. Believe me, we could. This is more interesting than I even thought it was going to be, and I thought it was going to be very interesting. But keep it here for more Unshaken and Unafraid with Joe Pags. Go check out soundoffreedombook.com. Go get it on Amazon. Check it. It's again, the other website you just mentioned is again?
Liberating Humanity.
Liberating Humanity. Go there as well. That's going to do it for this one. We're back with another one very soon.